Euthyphro is a perfect example of this. So if we look at the Euthyphro, actually go right to these texts, right? So here's the Apology. And did I show you, if you go up to browse, did I show you this on Wednesday? If you go up to browse, notice you can look at all the works by Plato. They're all there on the same site. And we can go to the Euthyphro. By the way, Euthyphro, EU is a prefix that means good. Theo is God, and phro is phronesis or analysis. So basically, Euthyphro means good God analysis. And the character who's named Euthyphro is a priest who's an expert on the gods. So Socrates finds himself in line, waiting for his trial. Euthyphro is ahead of him and waiting. And why are you here, Euthyphro? Well, I'm going to charge my father with murder because he killed one of my slaves by accidentally throwing him into a ditch full of water, and he drowned in the water. So Euthyphro is going to charge his father for killing a slave, and that's pretty clearly not considered a really good idea by everyone concerned. It seems pretty strange. You know, father versus a slave? Not really. Remember, slavery is kind of typical, really. I suppose the unusual thing is the United States and England, who decided that slavery was wrong about the same time. England first, right? You get the idea. Actually, it's more economical to make them a wage slave, instead. But that's a whole other issue to go into. But so Euthyphro is a priest, and he's a specialist. And so Socrates, who knows that he's going to be put on trial for impiety, says to Euthyphro, hey, while we're waiting, why don't you teach me how to be pious? Because obviously I'm not. And they're going to charge me with impiety, and I could at least go to them and say, I'm going to Euthyphro and getting lessons. I apologize for being stupid, but at least I'm going to try to improve myself. So I'm going to learn how to be pious. And Euthyphro says, of course, I'll help you. So they start off with definitions. This is the Elenicus, or Eleniki. How's that? You can look it up if you're interested. That's a whole other thing. But so they're going to try to define what piety is. Notice that's what all of the dialogues are attempts at doing. You've got, this one is going to try to define piety. You have the Apology is really a dialogue, of course, over what it means to be pious as well. But you also have dialogues on love. The Symposium is on love. They come up with 7 different possibilities and argue over them. You have the Republic, the biggest dialogue. Well, there's the Laws, there's the Symposium, and there's the Republic. I guess the Republic is pretty close to the biggest. And the Republic, which is an odd title, by the way, because it's actually Latin. Res publica is the public thing. In the Greek, you would be calling it the polity, which would be the Republic in Greek. But in any case, in the Republic, the dialogue is over the nature of justice. We'll be looking at that on Wednesday. Right? But in this one, they're trying to define a concept. Why is that an issue? They didn't have definitions before, apparently. And one of the books that's really kind of fascinating on this is Eric Havelock. the muse learns to write. Now, Eric Havelock was a colleague of Marsh McLuhan. Marsh McLuhan's most famous for the line, "The medium is the message." One of the reasons I dislike Blackboard is because trying to do a course on philosophy and teach folks philosophy. Meanwhile, it seems like 90% of my efforts are trying to help people figure out how to use Blackboard. And that's difficult for me because I don't know how to use Blackboard. I hate it, and I don't keep up with it because it seems just a waste of time. I want to teach philosophy, not computer stuff, right? Click here. Oh, look, now I can make a beautiful data sentence. The muse is the poet. And the poet is the previous Greek literature that they have, that everybody refers to. So, the Iliad, Hesiod, Works and Days. So they have poems that they refer to. The neat thing about these poems is you could do an analysis of the Iliad, for example. You'll discover that the gods are always working with the individuals. They're always listening to the gods. And at the same time, they're doing different things. So Achilles is a prime example of someone who's heroic, but what does he do that's so heroic? It's examples in the poetry. So if you want to be like Achilles, you imitate those things that he did. But once you're trying to move into prose, now you're free to examine these particular concepts and wonder what the concept means itself with all of these different contexts. And as we already can see, when you have multiple contexts, you're just confusing yourself by thinking that there ought to be just one definition of love that explains all the potential uses we have for it in our multiple languages, right? So what Plato is trying to do is suddenly, by switching to prose, now they're going to try to figure out what these particular concepts are. And so these dialogues are all arguing over what these different virtues are. So that's pretty interesting in itself. By the way, Eric Havelock was the father of a friend of mine, John Havelock, who died 3 years ago. By the way, his son, Eric Havelock, named for his grandfather, still lives here, etc. And I know he's a Facebook friend, etc. So John and I used to talk about this all the time. Growing up as the son of a philosopher, because Eric Havelock taught not only in Canada, but then became a professor at Harvard, so that's kind of fun. So lots, and there's other books that Eric did, including Preface to Plato, etc. Toronto was where he was a colleague with Marsh McLuhan, and that whole theme is interesting because, of course, what's happening here is if you're moving from orality, speaking, to writing, that new medium is going to have a powerful influence on those that are going to use it. Right? And of course, it still affects us. I mean, that's the big issue. What's social media doing to us? Facebook and this one. Oh gosh, I just love this one. Oh, am I driving you crazy, or is this okay? Everybody's happy with. I go from one thing to another. Squirrel. I know where that's from too. I saw the movie. It was a great movie. That's an example of what it was. Except I also forget what the heck I'm doing. What was I going to do? Social media. Ah, yes. course, that's what I meant. How can I help you today? I'm already logged in. Cool. How did Plato feel about writing? You know what I just did? Yes, everybody? So I'm logged into ChatGPT, which is AI, and I asked it a question. By the way, I've discovered that ChatGPT is wrong occasionally, maybe quite often. So you always have to read it and think, if by the way, you're going to use it in your term paper or even in your essays, fine. Just make sure you proof it and check and stuff. And I think it's important that you learn how to use these new tools as they come out, because they're going to be dominating the workplace as you're out there. I know legal briefs now are allowed to use ChatGPT to help write them. You've heard that? Yes? So let's see, what does it say? Plato, the ancient Greek philosopher, had mixed feelings about writing. In his dialogues, particularly in Phaedrus and his seventh letter, there were 7 letters. Not all 7 are considered genuine, but so Plato expressed both skepticism and concern about the written word. I believe that's true. He believed that writing could be a double-edged sword. On the other hand, he had concerns about the limitations of written language. Pretty interesting. He said writing was static. Well, he didn't know about Wikipedia, did he? Wikipedia is updated faster than history itself. Somebody's out there already working on it. So that's cool. But in this particular case, Euthyphro is going to teach Socrates the definition of piety. And it turns out that his definition of piety is doing what the gods love. Well, that's pretty easy. And by the way, it helps to know a priest, because the priest can hear the voices and tell me what the gods love. So I just listen to the priest and then do what the priest tells me the god said. Yes? Pretty easy. Well, but how many gods are there? 2,000, roughly. And it's kind of important to know which gods are which and what they're doing. And it's pretty easy when you have 2,000 gods to put up a problem that's not going to be solvable. So, for example, if I were going to be a true man, according to Zeus, what should I do? Do I need a trigger warning for this? So, this is another one of those that every artist has to deal with for some reason. Zeus transformed himself into different animals to rape different women. One of the more famous ones, at least as far as artists are concerned, is the swan. I don't know. Is that especially interesting? Imagining a swan raping a woman? That's weird, isn't it? I've driven by swans, and they seem pretty, stoic, just sitting out there in the lake. Pardon? They are mean, I suppose.
It helps that happens to be the longest and most detailed myth in which he turned into an animal and raped a woman.
Is that why I picked it? I don't know.
No, that's why it's just been so popular.
And so many different artists have tried to deal with this. But so Zeus basically thinks philandering, messing around, is like the thing to do. By the way, remember his wife Hera is in charge not only of time, but also matrimony. So guess what? She's totally against what Zeus likes. So it's pretty easy to question Euthyphro and say, well, should I be what Zeus wants me to do? Be pious to Zeus, or be pious to Hera? Yeah, you're stuck, right? This is an honest dilemma for them, right? Well, in that case, we're confused. We don't know what we're supposed to do. And so Socrates helps by pointing out, well, let me change the question a little bit. Is the pious pious because the gods love it? Or do the gods love the pious because it's so pious? See how that question hits? This question is considered to be the destructor. Once you get this question and you ask the priesthood class this question, then you end up kind of dismantling the whole priestly hierarchy. Because basically, by doing this, I've had a few students try to answer it in a way that protects the priesthood class by saying they're the same. It works out to be the same thing. Well, but we've already seen with this particular set of deities that it doesn't work that way, because you've got multiple deities that believe different things. You've got deities supporting the Trojans, deities supporting the Greeks. They fight one another. So pretty easy in that kind of a hierarchy to end up with a dilemma that you can't get out of. But I'm still sorry, I shouldn't leave you with the triggering. I didn't even look at all of the pictures. But so for Euthyphro, this is very concerning, and as a result, he can't answer it, and he rushes off. Because it's suggesting that instead of listening to the priest, what we could do is think for ourselves. Rationally, try to think what the pious is for ourselves, instead of listening to a voice in our heads, basically. Right? Euthyphro is upset, furious, and runs off, which I suspect is actually the goal that Socrates had, because he didn't think Euthyphro should file charges against his father. So that's one possibility. But in any case, notice that Euthyphro is pissed off at Socrates. And that seems to be a perfect example of why Socrates gets everybody so angry. He starts off by asking questions. You define the answer because you're the know-it-all, the one that gets money for this. So Socrates asks you to define your concept, and you end up giving him an answer. And Socrates used this Hellenic method, using different syllogisms and everything, to take that and analyze it and discover, well, it leads you to this conclusion which you don't like, so you can't keep that definition. You have to get rid of it. And you end up then redefining it until eventually you get to the point where you can't find one particular definition that covers all the possibilities. And they think that they should be able to do that, and so they're infuriated and they leave. So Socrates gets everybody upset, apparently, except for the young people that really like seeing this happen. Any questions on Socrates? Do you think he was guilty?
Yeah.
He was. Today it would be different, except maybe in Florida.
It just depends on where he was.
Yeah, I mean, there are some clear examples in the world where this stage of development has not been accepted or occurred yet. Oddly, even if it was one of the countries that used to be among the best. I mean, there were a lot of incredibly brilliant people in various empires that today have regressed, we might say, into a different kind of culture. So that's kind of interesting. Again, you get the example of, freedom isn't free. If you're thinking in terms of thinking, we've got to protect a opportunity to maintain freedom of thought, because otherwise it seems like the natural inclination of a society is to do away with it, which is kind of scary, especially if you're being paid as a philosophy professor. Actually, remember, my wife gets all the money, but she lets me live there, so that works well for me. So I do have another quiz question. Should I wait, though?
I'll take another one.
You'll take another one?
Mm-hmm.
So, based on this Euthyphro, imagine Jesus comes to your door, knocks at the door. You open the door, and hypothetically, you recognize that it's Jesus, and you know that he is God. And God tells you to sell everything you have and give the money to the poor. And then follow him. Do you do it? Or do you argue with him? Or say, not today?
Is this up for discussion?
Sure.
Well, I wouldn't make a decision until I ask for further information. Would I get any information if I ask for it?
I suppose.
So if I ask why, would I get an answer?
I would hope so.
Okay.
I don't know the answer myself. I suspect that Jesus was also, just like the Buddha, aware that attachment to physical things just brought more suffering, and that by giving up on it, he
I
freed
think
himself.
assuming a already credited religion, but if you're like an atheist and Jesus says, come join me.
That's why I use hypotheses there and say, he's Jesus. I mean, if a bearded guy knocks on your door, most people would first grab their gun and then shoot through the door and then ask the dying corpse, what? If you're at least in certain places in the United States.
I think I would, on the premise that I believe that he is God. I mean, if I'm believing in something like that, I feel that would, activate.
If you're-
be very important.
So you're saying that we would know, like, in a hypothetical world where everybody believed in the same religion, and we would know that it
Yeah.
is God, or is it just some person claiming to be God?
Well, I'm trying to do the same dilemma that Socrates is posing. If you think about it, what I'm asking is the same question. Are you going to listen to this voice or think for yourself? I gather your thought is, well, I'm going to ask questions. You want to think for yourself, you need more data.
I want to think for myself. I think if, without a doubt that he is God, I mean, I'm already believing in this, right? Similar to what you said. I wouldn't want to immediately do it, out myself, because we're talking about God and everything. It's like, there's still more things to be considered, but it is God.
I have him first, and then you have it.
So the last part of the question was, like, after giving away all your stuff, he says to follow him.
Yeah.
Is that in a spiritual sense or in a literal sense, like I have to follow?
Very good question. Very good question. Obviously, this comes from the scripture where Jesus says to the rich man who says, what can I do? Sell everything you have, give the money to the poor, and come follow me. And the rich man, not going to do that. Right? Yes, if
Yeah,
I'm
that-
understanding.
That was like the only part that like would determine my answer, is if it was like a spiritual follow, or like literally follow him wherever he goes.
Yeah. And by the way, I think our American culture trains us to be questioning anyone with this kind of view. Yes? You're supposed to be a free thinker, think for yourself, etc. You see a conflict there between a religious hierarchy and typical. By the way, being an American is a heretical imperative. And of course, I've got a book for you if you're curious about that. Great little book, The Heretical Imperative. And this is written by Peter Berger. And basically what he's saying, as an American, you're taught to think for yourself. And as a result, when I joined the Army, they said, "What religion are you?" So the government asks you what your religion is. You can say atheist, or you can say none, etc., right? Whatever. But thinking that it's right for you to answer that question on your own is heresy. It's the definition of heresy. A heretic thinks that they can make their own decision. So it's a heretical imperative. Being an American, you're a heretic, born to be a heretic. Born in the USA, yeah, etc. You know, you're going to be a heretic whether you planned it or not. No matter what your faith is, your state is telling you you get to think for yourself. Someone else wanted to, yeah.
So, what I'm understanding is this is less about whether or not we care for what Jesus has said or what God has said or any of that. It's more the question of, do we question him or do we go along with it, knowing that the pious thing would be to go along with it.
Well, I've had some interesting responses from people to this. What if you're a woman and you have a child? Do you bring, well, you should bring the child. I'm not going to leave the kid in the apartment all by itself. And of course, if you're bringing the child, you need the diaper bag, you need the stroller, you need lunch, you need changes. You know, this is a major operation. Have you ever seen people taking everything out to the car? Yes.
So everything though.
Even a child.
But also on the scale of selling everything, does that mean every single thing you own, including the clothes on your body?
I'm just trying to quote the scripture correctly. You know, that's the, you know.
Suppose the answer to the whole question is whether or not you would care more for your own values than your religion, because those are separate things sometimes.
I have to stop because our time is up and there are people already trying to get in. Remember, that's a quiz question. That's quiz question number 3. I do have it on my second set of notes because our class has been a little bit screwed up to the end, the first day of the semester off. But so there it is. Feel free. I don't have a right answer to these questions. So remember, the quiz questions, any answer at all gets added to your collection. And they're all A's. So feel free to say whatever you
That'd be a pretty big thing, that assumption, that I believe he is. I mean, on that assumption, I think things would be very different than without that assumption.
Yeah. I was raised to, of course, drop everything and go.
Yeah.
That's how I was raised.
I was raised question everything.
But by freshman year of college, I was like, what? Yeah.
You had Doug Green in your class last semester. I don't know if you remember him, but he's my boyfriend's brother, and their stepdad is Bruce Havelock, who's John Havelock's other son.
Oh, that is so
So
cool.
I live with them. So I live.
Ah, well, very, very cool. Tell them I said hello.
I
I
will.
almost thought about Facebooking Eric, and telling him, today's the day I'm going to mention your grandfather
Yeah.
if you're interested.
I'll tell Bruce.
Yeah, that's cool.